where the parents were raising those monies.
Yes.
Forgive me if I'm getting this wrong. I know some towns like Concord have foundations that support the school system. Now, how is that different than our parent communities? And is that something we should try and think about and consider? Because I know those foundations, I know in Concord it really does support the school system, is my understanding.
And there, many school districts have foundations. For example, here in North Reading, we have the Citizens Scholarship Foundation that does a terrific job and has for many years with very targeted purpose, and that's to support students post-secondary education. A lot of foundations, such as in Concord and Lexington and Winchester, raise a tremendous amount of money that's on top of what you would see with a typical parent association fundraising. But in general, again, it's not going to be used, can't be used to offset fundamental parts of the budget. It's the whole concept of supplementing versus supplanting. So in supplementing, you could use foundation money, let's say, you want to enhance your technology, or you want to develop an enrichment program, or you want to allow teachers to apply for mini grants that might bring innovative and unique programs to the schools. But I'm not aware of any foundation money that is used to offset the salary of the third grade teacher or the math teacher at the high school.
I know you're in contract negotiations, and I'm not asking any questions you shouldn't answer. If I am, don't answer them, obviously. My question is, why you pulled the salary pool out of the budget, but you haven't pulled the step increases out? And I know on the municipal side there are no step increases nor any salary pool in the budgets. Why don't we pull that out of the budget?
That's a good question. We're waiting for clarification. If we don't have a contract that's settled July 1st when we go into the new fiscal year, typically what happens is your current contract carries forward. Our current contract has steps in it, and every year everyone moves along one step. We just need to make sure that one of two things: if we take that money out, that we have some money if we're responsible for awarding those steps as of July 1st. And secondly, that we identify where that money would come from within the budget, and that would have to be positions, and we would have to be ready to put those people on warning that they may not have jobs to come back to if we start draining those funds down.
You're saying that if we don't have a contract, then the steps will automatically carry over?
That's been past practice. I think David probably...
Yeah, so we've asked for clarification, for a legal opinion on that, but regardless of what that opinion is, if we don't end up bargaining for no step movement, we would have to pay them. We bargained that contract, so we would need to know where we would find those funds. So, David, did you find
No, I
anything
think
out?
you answered it. Again, it's just under labor law, there are certain requirements for fair labor practice, and when you violate those, then you run the risk of coming up against the Mass Labor Commission with an unfair labor practice charge. I think there's been a lot of discussion, for example, with the changes in the health care, the costs. Those discussions are mandatory under Massachusetts general law to bargain them if there's a change in the design of the program. If you don't go through traditional bargaining, then it's up to the unions to determine whether or not they're going to file a charge. And then you have to weigh again, what is it going to cost to defend the community against those charges, and will there be a consequence of it? So we're looking at that from the health care standpoint. That's more on the municipal side. But I'll give you another example. Just on the changing of the year, the paraprofessional year, has implications in terms of whether or not that was a unilateral decision made by the school committee under the feeling that we felt that contractually we could do that, but still, my feeling is there'll be an unfair labor practice suit, which will then divert our time and money toward trying to deal with that. So you have to have a contract. When there's not a contracted position, then the provisions of the old one will carry forward. Again, whether or not step raises are embedded in that carry forward is a question that we're trying to really
And it's even awkward now discussing the salary pool, because quite frankly, we're right in the middle of this negotiations with the teachers, and for us to sit here and say we're eliminating the salary pool, and then to go back and say, well, we're negotiating in good faith, it puts us in a difficult position. I mean, the timing's, in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad, but, you know, we are, I think we are making some progress. We have a session tomorrow, and hopefully, you know, we'll have some answers soon.
Will we have a legal opinion on this before June 8th?
I hope so.
And certainly if we were able to bargain no step movement for next year and the funds were in the budget, we could find something to do with it.
You don't have to negotiate.
Right.
Your total
Right.
budget is not.
Right. Marcy?
A few comments and then a question, I guess. I appreciate the hard work that you're doing, and I know that of all the difficult years you've had, this is probably the most difficult. But as difficult it is for us as adults and for you as leaders, it's really a shame to have the students on a merry-go-round of education. Where we had a bad year last year, year of cuts. This year it was wonderful to be able to restore some of those. I know, speaking to the principals and the teachers, it's been a much better year, and that trickles down. Next year now we're looking at everybody hopping off the horse again and running around after the merry-go-round, trying to keep up, and that's not a good way to provide sound education to our children. And I say that to you, I say that to the state legislature, and all the way up to the President of the United States, who I'd love to come to North Reading when, after seeing him in his State of the Union address, saying no teacher will be laid off under the stimulus package. Well, welcome to Massachusetts, not only North Reading, but I'd love to welcome him here to Massachusetts. I think, maybe Dr. Trobe could comment on this. The stimulus seems, like an interesting problem to me, because if you could find sustainable savings and a smarter way to do business, wouldn't and shouldn't you do it regardless of whether there are stimulus funds?
Yes.
Regardless.
That's what we did.
So I don't understand the stimulus funds tied to doing the business in a better, more innovative way. I would challenge you whether they come or not. If there's a way to do it, we should do it regardless. So I guess that's a comment. And if you'd like to comment back on that, I appreciate it. And then lastly, a question. I have here, courtesy of one of my colleagues, a list from February that listed some level 2 cuts. Right now, it looks like at least some of them, many of them, are unavoidable. And I would ask whether you intend to prioritize these before town meeting, especially if you're going to put some teachers on notice. Which teachers are you going to put on notice? Are you going to put all these teachers on notice? I think we need to know, before we go into town meeting and vote a budget, for example, if we are going to lose the only accredited librarian in the school system and risk high school certification. We need to know that. That might be one that's worth spending the stimulus money a little more aggressively, or, going to the sacred cash box of stabilization, if that's on that list. Where do you stand on fees in this list versus cuts? I think I've had discussions with you before. I think you know where I stand. Fees before, as odious as they are, fees before large class sizes, fees before program cuts. I'd like to know where you stand on that. There's a whole laundry list here, and I think it would be very good to prioritize it, to decide as a community how far we can live, I don't want to live with any of them, but how far can we live with some of them before maybe we decide some of them are too detrimental to the system next year and long-term, before we say, let's use the ARA funds more aggressively and worry about fiscal 11 and fiscal 11, or, let's go to stabilization if we have to, which to me would be prioritized after the ARA fund. So can you prioritize these so the citizens?
Superintendent provided us a breakdown of the level twos into 3 tiers. They total $1,081,000 in reductions, and certainly that's more than we would need to.
These are the superintendent's priorities on the level.
We haven't gone through them, but for instance, the $200 user, $200,000 to eliminate high school athletics. It increases the user fee to a full sustaining, self-supporting athletic program. And this is why it's just the superintendent, because we haven't submitted.
Well, that's in tier 3 too, Mark.
He split down
Yeah.
from level 2, there's a $50,000 hit in tier 1.
Right, in tier 1, right.
And then $150,000 in tier 3, but it only speaks to athletics, it doesn't speak to extracurricular activities, so I would want to see that rolled in.
Well, the tier 1 does address activities. It addresses
Oh,
not only
okay,
athletic
the
fees, but activities. But Marcia, just so you know, I mean, the tier 1, tier 2 cuts in level 2 amount to about $380,000 total.
Tier 1 and tier 2 being the ones you would take tier 1 first, then tier 2.
Right.
Correct.
So it's about, the total of the two is about $380,000. And it essentially reduces 1.2 actual teaching positions. So, that is a possibility, although I don't think the school committee's approved those yet, even though they're recommendations by the superintendent.
Which teacher are you?
A high
Sorry,
school
to say
teacher.
which
A high school
1.2
teacher.
teaching positions are you?
A high school,
Yeah, 1 high school teacher.
but it takes.
It actually represents 2 additional teachers based on the virtual elimination of any kind of curriculum or department head leadership within the district. Because we have, for example, department head of the high school, English or math, they, instead of teaching 5 classes, they teach 4. So if we eliminated that, they'd go back and teach fully in their content area, but they would displace the equivalent of 1/5 of a teacher. And so when you add it all up, it's actually 2 more positions. So the net result there would be 3 teachers.
What does that kind of reduction in curriculum leadership do to an accreditation?
It would be an immediate, you have in your correspondence a letter from the New England Association saying that based on the progress report, we had to submit a special progress report for accreditation. Mr. Bernard needs to do that, but you'll see attached to that list is what's called a substantive change. This would be a substantive change. We would need to notify the accrediting agency of this kind of change. Similarly, if we lose our high school only a librarian in the entire district, that's an automatic notification to NEASC, which I'm sure would spark another special evaluation.
If we totally eliminated funding for athletics, would that also be something we'd have to notify them?
Absolutely.
Ms. Marcy?
Clearly, with the notification, we notify them, you should into the phone.
Right.
Cutting in the phone, but if it's the worst case scenario and some $750,000, if and I don't want to give anything, but in the economy and the choices, 380 on tier 1 and tier 2, if it's more palatable than tier 3, that gets you halfway to your worst case scenario, and maybe there's some other halfway with, ARA funds or stimulus that we can maintain. I think
Well, it may even get you more than halfway, because again, I hate to bring this up, but it's suggested, depending on how the negotiations go, it could bring you
Yeah, and I think it can
three
work.
quarters of the way there.
Because taking money from stabilization or using ARA aggressively is not, none of them are good choices, but putting the kids on the merry-go-round of stable year,